Top 1. Hessdalen Lights. In the remote Hessdalen Valley of central Norway, something has been glowing in the sky for decades. The valley itself is unremarkable, a narrow stretch of rural landscape, sparsely populated, surrounded by mountains and dense forest. But since the early 1980s, residents have repeatedly witnessed luminous orbs drifting silently through the air, hovering above the terrain, and vanishing without explanation. These were not meteors. They were not aircraft. They moved with a behavior that defied every conventional category science had available. The lights first drew serious attention in 1981, when reports from local residents became too frequent and too consistent to dismiss. Witnesses described orbs of white, yellow, and red light ranging in size, from small floating spheres to massive elongated structures stretching hundreds of meters. Some hovered motionless for extended periods. Others accelerated at speeds exceeding 30,000 km/h, a velocity that no known aircraft, drone, or atmospheric phenomenon has ever been recorded achieving. The duration of individual sightings ranged from a few seconds to over an hour. By 1983, the phenomenon had attracted the attention of Norwegian and Swedish scientists. Project Hessdalen was formally launched, deploying instruments across the valley to monitor and record the lights systematically. The data collected was immediate and overwhelming. Between 1983 and 1984 alone, researchers documented over 188 separate light events. Cameras, radar systems, spectrographic analyzers, and magnetometers all confirmed the same conclusion. Something physical was present in that valley. These were not optical illusions, mass hallucinations, or atmospheric reflections. The instruments detected real objects with measurable electromagnetic signatures. What made the findings deeply unsettling was not just the presence of the lights, but their behavior. Spectroscopic analysis revealed that the orbs emitted a spectrum inconsistent with any known natural light source. Radar returns confirmed solid structure within certain formations. Yet no physical object was ever recovered. The lights appeared to interact with the surrounding magnetic field of the valley, which itself sits on a geological fault line rich in sulfur, copper, and iron deposits. Some researchers propose that the unique mineral composition of the ground was generating a natural battery effect, producing ionized plasma that floated freely through the air. But this model collapsed under scrutiny. Plasma does not self-organize, does not sustain for hours, and does not accelerate to the speeds observed. Embley, a subsequent scientific project launched in 2000, deployed more sophisticated equipment, including advanced radar and cameras. The results confirmed previous findings, but answered nothing new. The lights continued to appear on their own schedule, indifferent to the instruments pointed at them. As of today, the Hessdalen lights remain one of the most rigorously studied and least understood natural phenomena on Earth. Decades of continuous scientific observation have produced extensive data and zero definitive explanations. The valley still glows, the orbs still drift, and every model built to explain them has quietly, without announcement, fallen short. Top 2. Brown Mountain Lights. In the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Burke County, North Carolina, something has been burning in the night sky for centuries. The lights appear above and around Brown Mountain, a long, low ridge in the Pisgah National Forest, glowing in soft reds, blues, and whites, rising slowly from the tree line, hovering, and then dissolving into the darkness without trace. They are not reflections. They are not fires. They have been witnessed by thousands of people across generations, investigated by federal agencies, and studied by scientists who left with more questions than they arrived with. The earliest recorded account dates to 1913 when a German engineer named Gerard Willem documented the phenomenon during an expedition through the region. But Cherokee oral tradition places the lights much further back, describing them as the spirits of women searching for warriors lost in an ancient battle. The lights in some form appear to have been present long before anyone thought to write them down. In 1913, the United States Geological Survey dispatched investigators to Brown Mountain, following a surge in public reports. Their initial conclusion attributed the lights to locomotive headlights from the Southern Railway passing through the valley below. That explanation collapsed almost immediately. In 1916, severe flooding destroyed the railway bridges, halting all train movement through the region entirely. The lights continued to appear without interruption. The USGS returned in 1922. This time, investigators acknowledged that while some sightings could be attributed to car headlights and atmospheric refraction, a significant portion of the observed phenomena remained unexplained by any conventional source. What the investigators could not account for was the behavior. The lights rose vertically from the ridge, which no headlight reflection could replicate. They appeared on nights with zero traffic in the valley. They were witnessed before automobiles existed in the region at all. Historical records from 1771 document a sighting by a group of German settlers over a century before the first car rolled through North Carolina. The headlight theory, however convenient, simply does not reach far enough back in time to explain what people have been seeing. Scientific hypotheses have since multiplied. One prominent theory centers on piezoelectric effects, the geological stress on quartz-rich rock formations beneath the mountain generating electrical discharge that manifests as visible plasma. The Grandfather Mountain fault system runs directly through the area, making seismic stress a geological certainty. But controlled testing of this model has never produced results consistent with the scale, duration, or color variation of the lights observed. Plasma physicists, geologists, and atmospheric scientists have each attempted to construct a working model. None has achieved consensus. The lights appear on their own terms, on their own schedule, answering to no theory and no instrument. Brown Mountain has been studied for over a century. It remains without qualification, unsolved. Top 3, Eternal Flame falls in the middle of Chestnut Ridge Park in Orchard Park, New York. Tucked behind a small waterfall in a shallow sandstone grotto, a flame burns. It is roughly the size of a human fist. It flickers orange and yellow, fed by natural gas seeping through a crack in the rock. Hikers stumble upon it on weekend trails. Children photograph it. It has become a modest local attraction in a quiet corner of western New York. But beneath its unassuming appearance lies a geological problem that has quietly unsettled scientists for years. This flame should not exist, and more precisely, it should not be sustained by the rock formation it sits inside. Natural gas seeps are not unusual in geological terms. Methane and other combustible gases escape through fissures in the earth in various locations around the world. What makes the Eternal Flame Falls scientifically anomalous is the specific rock it emerges from. The flame sits within the Rhine Street Shale Formation, a relatively cold, shallow, and geologically young rock unit that, according to every established model of thermogenic gas generation, should not be producing natural gas at all. Thermogenic gas requires extreme heat and pressure built over millions of years deep within the earth. The Rhine Street Shale is too shallow, too cool, and too young to generate it by any accepted mechanism. A research team led by Giuseppe Etiope of the Italian National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology conducted a formal study published in 2013 in the journal Marine and Petroleum Geology. Their findings confirmed what the geology had already suggested was impossible. The gas composition emerging from the Chestnut Ridge seep was rich in ethane and propane alongside methane, a signature consistent with thermogenic gas produced under high heat conditions. Yet the surrounding rock showed none of the thermal maturity required to produce it. The source of the gas had no geological explanation consistent with the formation it was escaping from. The research team proposed that the gas might be migrating from a deeper, older formation through undetected fractures in the subsurface, but no such fracture system has been identified or mapped. The migration pathway, if it exists, remains entirely invisible to current instrumentation. The gas continues to emerge at a consistent rate, fed by a source that has not been located through a pathway that has not been found, from a formation that should not be producing it. The flame itself extinguishes periodically. Rainfall and water flow from the falls above occasionally smother it. Visitors who find it dark are instructed to relight it with a match or lighter. It catches immediately as though the supply beneath is constant and uninterrupted, which according to every geological model applied to this site, it should not be. A small flame behind a waterfall in upstate New York has produced a question that modern geology cannot answer. The rock says it is impossible. The flame says otherwise, and the flame has been burning far longer than the argument. Top 4 Fairy Circles. The fairy circles along the coastal stretches of the Namib Desert run through Namibia and extend into parts of Angola and South Africa. The land is covered in a pattern so precise and so vast that it appears from above to have been designed. Circular patches of bare earth, each ringed by a thin belt of unusually tall grass, repeat across the landscape in their millions. They range from 2 meters to 15 meters in diameter. They maintain consistent spacing between each other. They appear and disappear over decades following rules that no random natural process has yet been shown to produce. The local sand people call them fairy circles. Scientists call them one of the most debated unsolved mysteries in ecology. The circles were first formally documented by researchers in the 1970s, though the indigenous communities of the region had observed and mythologized them for generations. Early scientific attention focused on soil composition. Studies confirmed that the bare interior patches contained higher moisture retention than surrounding soil, creating a subsurface water reservoir that fed the grasses growing along the outer ring. The circles were not simply dead zones. They were functioning structures actively redistributing water through the desert ecosystem in a way that kept the surrounding vegetation alive during extreme drought conditions. This discovery deepened rather than solved the mystery. Something was creating these structures with apparent functional purpose. The question was, what? Two competing theories have dominated the scientific debate for over a decade, and neither has defeated the other. The first, championed by Namibian researcher Norbert Jurgens, proposes that sand termites of the species Samothermes are responsible. According to this model, termites clear vegetation from circular patches to access subsurface moisture, creating bare areas that reduce evaporation and effectively function as underground water tanks. Jurgens documented consistent termite presence within active fairy circles and published his findings in the journal Science in 2013, drawing immediate international attention. The second theory, led by theoretical physicist Stefan Getson and computational ecologist Karina Tarnita, argues that the circles are produced by plants mathematically competing for scarce water resources. Using sophisticated computational models published in Nature in 2017, their team demonstrated that vegetation self-organizes into regular geometric patterns under conditions of extreme resource scarcity, a process driven entirely by the mathematics of competition and survival with no biological architect required. Their models produced patterns strikingly similar to the actual fairy circles observed in the field. The fierce disagreement between these two camps has produced years of competing publications, field studies, and mathematical models. Both explanations have supporting evidence. Neither fully accounts for every observed characteristic of the circles, their precise spacing, their longevity, their simultaneous appearance and disappearance across enormous geographic areas, and their recent discovery in the Pilbara region of Western Australia, thousands of miles from any African termite population. As of today, no consensus exists. The circles continue forming and dissolving on their own timeline, indifferent to the scientists arguing over them. Top 5 Klerksdorp spheres. In the pyrophyllite deposits of the Ottosdal region in South Africa's Northwest Province, miners have been pulling small metallic spheres out of the earth for decades. The spheres are found embedded in Precambrian rock estimated at approximately 3 billion years old, among the oldest surface-accessible geological formations on the planet. They are hard, dense, and dark, ranging from 1 centimeter to 10 centimeters in diameter. Many are perfectly round. Others are flattened into a disc-like shape, and a significant number of them carry something that has no satisfactory geological explanation. 3 parallel grooves running with precision around their equators, evenly spaced, consistent in depth, and aligned as though placed there deliberately. The spheres were not discovered in a single location. They have been extracted from multiple mining sites across the Ottosdal area over several decades, with specimens accumulating in collections held by museums, private researchers, and geologists worldwide. The Klerksdorp Museum in South Africa houses a documented collection. Scientists who have examined them acknowledge their unusual characteristics without arriving at agreement on what produced them. The grooves in particular have generated the most intense scrutiny. Parallel equatorial grooves of consistent depth and spacing do not appear in any other known natural concretion formation anywhere on Earth. Geologists who have formally studied the spheres maintain that they are natural formations, a type of mineral concretion produced when dissolved minerals precipitate around a central nucleus within sedimentary rock over millions of years. Concretions are common in geological records and frequently produce spherical or disc-shaped forms. The official scientific position, held by researchers including Paul Heinrich of the Louisiana Geological Survey, attributes the grooves to natural stress fractures and layered mineral deposition patterns within the host rock. According to this model, the visual precision of the grooves is coincidental, a product of the way pyrophyllite and iron oxide compounds crystallize under specific pressure conditions over vast timescales. But this explanation has not fully satisfied all who examine the specimens. The consistency of the grooves across multiple individual spheres found at separate locations presents a statistical challenge. Natural processes producing random concretions do not typically generate the same precise equatorial groove pattern repeatedly across geographically distributed specimens. The grooves do not appear on all spheres, but on those that carry them, the alignment and regularity are striking enough that numerous engineers and material scientists who have examined photographs and physical specimens have stated publicly that the pattern resembles a manufacturing tolerance rather than a geological accident. NASA scientist and space archaeologist Richard Hoagland brought significant public attention to the spheres in the 1980s, suggesting they represented evidence of pre-human intelligent activity. Mainstream science rejected this interpretation firmly and completely. Yet the rejection of the fringe conclusion did not produce a universally accepted natural explanation either. 3 billion years of geological pressure created something that looks precision-made. Whether that appearance reflects reality or merely challenges the limits of human pattern, recognition remains, formally and scientifically, an open question. Top 6. The Boiling River. Deep in the heart of the Peruvian Amazon, 4 hours from the nearest city, and accessible only by foot through dense jungle, a river runs hot enough to kill. The Shanai Timpishka, known locally as the Boiling River, stretches approximately 6.5 kilometers through the rainforest of the Huánuco region. Its water temperature ranges from 40 degrees C at the edges to over 92 degrees at its center, just below the boiling point of water at that altitude. Animals that fall in do not survive. The water scalds flesh from bone within minutes. Locals have documented cases of small mammals and reptiles falling into the river and emerging as cooked carcasses carried downstream by the current. The river is real, the heat is real, and the source of that heat has no satisfactory scientific explanation. The existence of the boiling river was known to indigenous Amazonian communities for generations. The Ashaninka people of the region considered it sacred, referring to it as a place where the earth itself breathed heat. It appeared in Spanish colonial records as early as the 16th century, dismissed by European explorers as local mythology or exaggeration. It was not formally introduced to the international scientific community until 2011, when Andrés Russo, a geothermal scientist and National Geographic explorer, visited the site after hearing about it from his family and subsequently dedicated years of formal research to studying it. What Russo found confounded standard geothermal models immediately. Conventional geothermal heating of surface water requires proximity to a magmatic heat source, essentially a volcano or active magma chamber beneath the Earth's surface. The established geological rule holds that a non-volcanic hot spring of significant temperature must sit within a few kilometers of active magmatic activity. The nearest volcanic arc to the boiling river is located approximately 700 kilometers away in the Andes Mountains. By every standard geothermal model, a river of this temperature should be physically impossible at this location. Russo conducted extensive water sampling, temperature mapping, and geological surveys. His findings, published and presented through National Geographic and academic channels, confirmed the anomaly without resolving it. The heat signature of the river is consistent with deep geothermal activity, but no proximate magmatic source has been identified beneath the site. One hypothesis proposes that ancient fault systems running beneath the Amazon basin channel heat from distant geothermal sources through deep fracture networks to the surface. But this model requires a fracture system of extraordinary scale and continuity that has not been mapped or confirmed. The river feeds from hot springs emerging along its banks, each one contributing superheated water to the main channel. The springs themselves show no surface evidence of the geological infrastructure required to produce them. The ground above them is ordinary rainforest floor, unremarkable, cool, and dense with vegetation growing right to the water's edge. The Amazon has kept this river boiling for longer than recorded history. Modern geothermal science has studied it for over a decade. The heat source remains unconfirmed, the geological mechanism remains unidentified, and the river continues to flow, scalding everything it touches, answering to no model science has yet constructed. Top 7. Lake Vostok. Beneath 4 kilometers of Antarctic ice, sealed from the surface world for an estimated 15 million years, exists a liquid lake the size of Lake Ontario. It has no sunlight. It has no connection to the atmosphere above it. The pressure bearing down on it from the ice sheet above is approximately 350 times the atmospheric pressure experienced at sea level. By every biological model science held prior to its discovery, nothing should be alive inside it. What researchers have found since drilling into its vicinity has produced results that the scientific community has not fully processed, debated without resolution, and in certain cases, chosen not to discuss openly. Lake Vostok was first theorized in the 1950s by Russian geographer Andrei Kapitsa, based on seismic survey data collected during early Antarctic expeditions. Decades of subsequent radar measurements confirmed its existence. A vast, dark body of liquid water sitting in complete isolation beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. The Soviet Union and later Russia established Vostok Station directly above it, drilling through the ice for decades in pursuit of climate data locked within the ancient ice cores. In February 2012, after over 20 years of drilling, the Russian team finally breached the ice layer directly above the lake surface, making contact with water that had been isolated from the rest of the planet since the Miocene epoch. What came back up the borehole immediately generated controversy. Water samples retrieved from the drill showed the presence of DNA sequences that did not match any known organism in existing biological databases. Russian scientists announced the discovery cautiously, acknowledging the possibility of contamination from drilling fluids, while simultaneously noting that certain sequences appeared too structurally distinct to be explained by contamination alone. Among the sequences identified was one bearing similarity to a previously unknown species, provisionally described in early reports before subsequent announcements became significantly more guarded. The anomalies extended beyond biology. Sonar mapping of the lake's floor revealed an unexplained heat source beneath the southern basin, a thermal signature inconsistent with the geothermal baseline of the surrounding Antarctic bedrock. No volcanic activity has been confirmed beneath that specific region of the ice sheet. The heat source has not been identified. Additionally, sonar readings detected what researchers described as an unusually smooth, elevated formation on the lake floor, a feature that generated significant internal discussion before disappearing from published reports without formal explanation or retraction. The international scientific community has raised persistent concerns about Russian data transparency regarding Lake Vostok findings. Full data sets from the 2012 breakthrough and subsequent drilling seasons have not been made comprehensively available for independent peer review. What has been published confirms liquid water, ancient isolation, extreme pressure, anomalous biology, and an unidentified heat source. What has not been published remains unknown. 15 million years of darkness, pressure, and isolation have produced something beneath Antarctica that science has touched but not understood. The lake does not offer explanations. It offers samples, anomalies, and silence. And the silence so far has been louder than the data. Top 8. The Ringing Rocks in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Roughly 40 miles north of Philadelphia, there is a field of boulders that should not make the sounds they make. The Ringing Rocks Park sits on approximately 10 acres of open land, covered in a dense layer of dark diabase boulders ranging from fist-sized stones to massive formations, weighing several tons. When struck with a hammer or another rock, certain boulders produce a clear, resonant, metallic tone, sharp and bell-like, ringing through the air with a quality more consistent with a steel pipe than a rock sitting in a Pennsylvania field. The sound is immediate, clean, and deeply wrong. Rock does not ring like metal. These rocks do, and science has spent decades failing to fully explain why. The phenomenon has been known since at least the mid-19th century. In 1890, a physician and amateur scientist named J. Gibbons Hunt organized what may be the most unusual musical performance in American history. Hunt selected a series of boulders from the ringing rocks field that produced distinct tones at different pitches and assembled them into a functional outdoor instrument. He then performed a concert using the rocks as a lithophone, accompanied by a brass band. The performance was documented and attended by a significant local audience. The fact that naturally occurring boulders in a Pennsylvania field could be tuned and performed with was remarkable enough at the time. The fact that science still cannot fully explain the acoustic mechanism over a century later is more remarkable still. What deepens the mystery is not simply that some rocks ring, but that others in the same field do not. Geologists and acoustical engineers who have studied the site consistently note that the ringing boulders and the silent boulders are composed of identical diabase rock. The same mineral composition, the same geological origin, the same formation history. Samples taken from ringing and non-ringing boulders and analyzed in laboratory conditions show no measurable compositional difference. Yet placed in the field, some ring with extraordinary clarity and others produce nothing but a dull thud. The variable that produces the difference has never been identified. One hypothesis centers on internal stress. Researchers, including geologist Richard Fias of Lafayette College, proposed in the 1960s that the ringing boulders contain residual internal tension accumulated during the cooling of diabase rock from its original molten state. Stress that effectively pre-tensions the rock like a tuning fork, allowing it to vibrate and resonate when struck. Laboratory testing of this model produced partial support. Boulders removed from the field and tested individually lost their ringing quality entirely, only to regain it partially when returned and left in place for extended periods. This suggested that the surrounding field environment, the specific arrangement, contact points, and collective mass of the boulder field as a whole contributed to the acoustic behavior in ways that isolated testing could not replicate. But the stress hypothesis does not explain why adjacent boulders of identical composition respond differently. It does not explain what environmental factor within the field selectively activates resonance in certain stones. Acoustic engineers, geologists, and material scientists have each approached the problem and retreated without consensus. The boulders sit in their field, indifferent to the debate surrounding them, ringing or staying silent entirely on their own terms. Top 9. The Taos Hum. In the high desert town of Taos, New Mexico, approximately 2,300 residents have been hearing something that should not be there. It is a low, persistent mechanical drone described consistently as resembling a diesel engine idling at a distance or the low thrum of a refrigerator heard through a wall at night. It is always there. It does not stop. It does not fluctuate significantly with weather, season, or time of day. It penetrates walls, earplugs, and soundproofed rooms. It has driven residents to sleep deprivation, chronic anxiety, and in documented cases, complete relocation from the area. And despite decades of scientific investigation involving some of the most sophisticated acoustic detection equipment available, its source has never been found. Reports of the hum began surfacing consistently in the early 1990s, though some residents claim to have heard it earlier. The phenomenon drew enough public attention and congressional concern that in 1993 the United States government commissioned a formal investigation. A team of researchers from multiple institutions, including Sandia National Laboratories, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and the University of New Mexico, was assembled and deployed to Taos with the specific mandate of identifying the source of the sound. They conducted extensive acoustic measurements, electromagnetic surveys, geological assessments, and interviews with affected residents over an extended period. The team's final report submitted to Congress confirmed several important facts and resolved nothing. Approximately 2% of the Taos population could hear the hum, a figure that remained consistent across different demographic groups. The hum was not detectable by standard microphones or acoustic recording equipment deployed in the field, meaning that despite being clearly audible to sensitive individuals, it left no measurable trace on instrumentation, designed specifically to capture it. The report concluded that the source of the hum could not be identified. No industrial facility, no military installation, no geological process, and no electromagnetic source in the region was confirmed as responsible. Subsequent investigations have proposed and eliminated numerous candidates. Nearby facilities, including Kirtland Air Force Base and various military research installations in New Mexico, were examined as potential sources of low-frequency sound transmission through the ground. None were confirmed. Geological hypotheses propose that natural gas moving through underground formations or seismic microactivity could produce low-frequency vibrations perceived as sound by sensitive individuals. These models were tested and produced no definitive match to the specific frequency profile described by Taos residents. Perhaps most unsettling is the selective perception of the hum. The overwhelming majority of people in Taos hear nothing unusual whatsoever. Those who do hear it describe an experience of acute, inescapable distress, a sound that follows them indoors, disrupts sleep, and cannot be blocked by any conventional means. No neurological or audiological abnormality has been identified in those who perceive it compared to those who do not. What some people hear clearly, instruments cannot detect. What instruments cannot detect, science cannot locate. And what science cannot locate, it cannot stop. The hum continues. Taos sits in its high desert silence, disturbed for some and perfectly quiet for others, divided by a frequency no one has ever successfully recorded. Top 10. Movil Cave. In 1986, workers drilling for construction near the Black Sea coast of Romania broke through a limestone wall and discovered something that should not have existed. Behind the wall was a sealed cave, completely isolated from the surface world, from sunlight, from fresh air, and from the biological systems that support virtually every known form of life on Earth. The cave had been sealed for an estimated 5 million years. The air inside contained almost no oxygen and was saturated with hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide at levels lethal to most surface organisms. What the workers did not expect, and what scientists who entered shortly afterward could barely reconcile with existing biological models, was that the cave was full of life. Movil Cave, located near the city of Mangalia in southeastern Romania, was formally investigated beginning in 1986 under the direction of Romanian biologist Cristian Lascu. What researchers found inside constituted one of the most extraordinary biological discoveries of the 20th century. The cave contained an entire functioning ecosystem: bacteria, fungi, spiders, scorpions, centipedes, leeches, isopods, and insects, all living in complete darkness, in toxic air, with no sunlight, no surface nutrients, and no connection to the food chains that sustain life everywhere else on the planet. 33 of the species discovered inside were entirely new to science. Of those, the majority exist nowhere else on Earth. The foundation of this ecosystem is chemosynthesis, a biological process in which certain bacteria derive energy from chemical reactions involving hydrogen sulfide rather than from sunlight through photosynthesis. These bacteria form microbial mats floating on the surface of the cave's water and coating its walls, effectively functioning as the base of a food chain that replaces sunlight with toxic gas. Every organism above them in the ecosystem feeds directly or indirectly on this chemosynthetic foundation. The cave operates as a completely self-contained biological world running on an energy system that contradicts the foundational assumption of surface ecology, that all complex life ultimately depends on the sun. What science has not resolved is how this ecosystem assembled itself, sustained its complexity, and maintained its diversity across 5 million years of complete isolation. The evolutionary pathways that produced 33 unique species within a sealed, toxic environment represent a biological puzzle with no equivalent elsewhere on land. Marine hydrothermal vent ecosystems operate on similar chemosynthetic principles, but Movil Cave is terrestrial, a land-based, air-breathing ecosystem running entirely without solar energy, something that existing ecological models had not predicted and still struggle to fully accommodate. The cave is now one of the most restricted research sites in the world. Entry requires special permits, sealed equipment, and breathing apparatus. Only a small number of scientists have physically entered it. The ecosystem continues functioning undisturbed. Predators hunting prey, bacteria feeding everything above them, evolution continuing in darkness and poison, entirely indifferent to the models it has broken. 5 million years of isolation produced a world inside a world. Science has named its inhabitants, mapped its chemistry, and documented its food chains. It has not explained how life sealed inside rock and toxic air built something this complex, this diverse, and this stubbornly alive. If these stories change the way you look at the mysteries hidden in the corners of our world, please subscribe and like the channel. We are excavating the history and phenomena that have remained unexplained for far too long. Help us grow this community of discovery. The next treasure of the unknown will be revealed soon.